With that aside, let me introduce today the two speakers we're very honored to have here join us and have a very, in my opinion, have a lot of insight on from different perspective of this topic. Vijay Swarup, who's corporate vice president for R&D at ExxonMobil. You know, in many ways, Vijay is believe it or not, is the source of this conference. He and I go back. Actually, we laugh about it. The last thing I did before leaving Exxon was to sign his employment thing at Exxon about I don't know, about 40 or 50 years ago, but more importantly, relevant to today's topic. You know, I had, even though I worked there, and even though I thought the people were great, you know, I had some weariness because of their size of interacting with ExxonMobil. And at one point, Vijay called me up about our caption and took me out to dinner. And there was something he said at dinner that really, I really consider the seed of today's meeting in many ways. You know, he said he was really being motivated by trying to find a way to give energy to his homeland India in a way that would help the billions of people there in energy poverty. I mean, the mass of people there in energy poverty. That made a big impact on me there. And then further on, he when he attended and gave a speech at the first summit, he really made the strong case for why it's very important that we give greater energy access to the people around the world, and that's not the source of the mission of energy companies to do that. And so, of course, in full disclosure, the interaction went so well that we now have a joint development agreement for our technology. And again, I'd just like to acknowledge that Vijay is really understands in a deeper way that I think we'd all be better off if everybody understood it the way he does of the challenges we face and what's needed, how the unusual or the innovative ways of working together cooperatively, a small company like ours and a big company like his, to make real progress that's needed to address the threats we face. So I really have found it a great pleasure in working together with him on this. And so with that, Vijay, let's turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Peter. Let me, if I could correct one thing.
Yeah.
It was 40 to 50 years ago. Okay. I mean, that was a little, I'll say it was over 30, but I'm not going to say it was 40 or 50 years ago.
Okay, right.
That would not be good.
Right.
But anyway, look, it is truly an honor to be asked to speak at this summit. I think last year's was exceptional, a lot of learning, and I think this is a carry on to that. Just speaks to the commitment and to the energy that this great body of people has to solving a problem. So let's talk about this in terms. Let's try to put this in context in terms of what are we trying to do? Because often many of the people in this call are scientists or engineers, and a lot of it comes down to understanding. So what is the problem? And people sometimes try to oversimplify the problem. But let's start with just a real basic thing, right? First off, it is great to see everybody on Zoom. One of the things that we've been doing on Zoom lately is having a little team building, is guess everybody's height, because nobody knows how tall anybody is on Zoom. And in fact, I have suddenly met people face to face for the first time in 20 months, and I often get the comment that, hey, you're taller than I thought you were, or you're shorter. Right? So we now play the little game. So I don't know if you guys have time to do that later on today, but you know, guess what height they are, and that's always fun when you actually meet them. But the fact is, all kidding aside, is this meeting is enabled by energy. The stuff that we did over the last 20 months, when you think about it, and how much of that is enabled by access to energy. If you have intermittent energy, Zoom calls don't work very well. And if you have no energy, Zoom calls don't work at all. And so while we talk about this in terms of, you know, energy is a given, because nobody woke up this morning and wondered if their lights were going to come on. Nobody is sitting in a car wondering if the fuel actually works. If you have it, you more or less take it for granted. And if you don't have it, it's magic. And in fact, when I was growing up, we didn't have intermittent power because we were losing power. We had intermittent power because you got 2 hours of electricity a day, and you got X number of hours of water a day, and you just managed your workday around it. You filled up the buckets of water when the water was on. You had the fans on while the electricity was on, and you did everything else by transistor radios and stuff like that. And so that's the challenge we have right now, right? We want to eradicate energy poverty. Now, when I started with ExxonMobil over 30 years ago, the pathway to doing that actually wasn't clear. How do you get energy to everybody? In fact, energy was a limited resource, or deemed to be a limited resource. It's no longer a limited resource. We have energy. We have forms of energy, and a lot of that was enabled by technology. So whether it's solar and wind enabled by technology, or quite frankly, even in the US with fracking that enabled a whole tranche of hydrocarbons that we didn't think we had access to, those are all technology enablers. And so we sit here today with ample energy, but there's a second problem. It comes back to defining the problem, which is now we want to supply affordable and reliable energy, which is what companies like ours have done forever. But now you need to do it with a lower carbon footprint. That becomes what we call the dual challenge. How do you continue to provide affordable, reliable energy while bending the curve, while getting the emissions to come down? And as many as you know, the developed nations have largely peaked on emissions and have been. The developing nations who don't have access to energy are growing emissions. And so that becomes the dual challenge. And how do we go about addressing this challenge? So how do we do this, right? So we need technology. And of course, last year's summit focused a lot on technology. And as I looked at the booklet of this year's summit, there are a lot of technology people here. And so we need to continue to work on this technology. And obviously one of the reasons we're working on direct air capture with Peter's team is because there's very, very few technologies that I'm aware of that are infinite in feed. I don't think we're going to run out of air, and are agnostic to location. You can build a direct air capture facility essentially wherever you want, because as everybody here knows, CO2 is at equilibrium in the environment, regardless of where you live. And so those technologies, which I got to tell you, 10 years ago were probably beyond my imagination, but are now actually being demonstrated, and are being demonstrated at scales that matter. And so that working on solutions is critical. The call on technology has never been greater. We need to advance technology across two time frames. We have to keep doing what we're doing today because people don't want to lose the access to energy. They don't want to lose what they're doing today. So we have to scale today. We have to deploy technologies that are ready to be deployed today. We have to continue to work down the efficiency pathway. But then we have to close the technology gaps. And how do you close those technology gaps? Well, Peter kind of referenced this in his opening, which is we have to rethink collaboration. We have to have summits like this one, where you can have an open discussion, where it's an inclusive discussion. It's not one or the other, it's one and the other. How does this all fit together? Because this is one of those all of the above answers. And so these collaborative sessions, and then we have to change the way we collaborate. So large and small, universities with large companies, cross academics, cross countries, getting universities in India to work with universities in the US, getting national labs to work together. And the key is doing this at scale. And that's one of the things that Peter and I talked about early on when we started our collaboration, is everything we do in terms of the research, in terms of development, has to have a pathway to scale. And what you can't do is you can't speed innovation. Putting a deadline on an invention is a very hard thing to do. What you can do is try to change the way you do things. And instead of doing things in series, Instead of waiting for all of the fundamentals to be understood before you do a first deployment, do the first deployment and bring that data back into the fundamentals. And what we're finding is you actually shift the way you're trying to progress the fundamentals. And these types of open collaborations where you're challenging constructively, you're having the discussion, those are extremely beneficial. Forums like these, bringing people together, even though we're all on little 2-inch by 2-inch squares, but the way that Nadia and Peter have organized this thing to drive the collaboration, to drive the ideation, and quite frankly, drive the optimism and the motivation, because that's what we need to have. This can get to be a very daunting problem until you go back to what you learned in college, which is you break problems into subproblems, and you break subproblems into subproblems until you have a solvable subproblem. And then you start working your way down the pathway, sort of a finite element approach, right? X plus delta X. You keep working on that delta X, and before you know it, you've gone from one end to the other end, taking the right steps. The acceleration of those comes through collaboration, comes through deployment, comes through parallelism. So Peter, Nadia, Nicholas, and the rest of the team, I can't thank you enough for including me again. It is an honor beyond anything I could imagine that I get asked to speak at these. I think what you're doing is fantastic. I think this affordable, reliable, scalable energy is critical, not just to the people that have it today and want it in a form with lower emissions, but to the billion people who don't have it today and the 2 billion more people that are coming that are going to want to live the same type of lifestyle we live. So once again, thank you so much for inviting me. Thanks for working around my schedule. And I'll turn it over to you, Peter, to introduce. Thank you.
Sure.